Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. In honor of Father's Day, happy Father's Day to all of you fathers out there, I want to pay tribute to the two patriarch characters on the Waltons, the two main ones, Grandpa and John Walton. So today I'm going to start off talking about Will Geer as Grandpa Walton, and then tomorrow I will follow up with a segment about Ralph Waite. So make sure that you catch both these segments. I thought I would start with Will Geer, who played Grandpa Zebulon Walton. Of course, on the series, he was the father of John and John's brother Ben, who was killed in the war. And then there's some sort of question about whether there were other children. At some point, perhaps a daughter was mentioned, but we don't know any more about her. And in the homecoming, Grandma said, "All my sons were handsome," which to me implies there was more than two. So who knows how many children Zeb and Esther actually had. In real life, Will Geer did have several children. He had 3 of his own and a stepdaughter. Will's daughter, Ellen, of course, was in a couple of episodes of The Waltons. And then his son, Tad, served as his stand-in for many years on the show. Zebulon was a great father figure, and he not only we had a sense of him being John's father, but we also had the sense of when he took on sort of a parental role with some of the Walton children. So first off, with John, it varied. They spent a lot of time working together in the mill, and at times they got along great, and at other times they butted heads, and sometimes Grandpa felt that he was underappreciated. And in fact, in the episode The Caretakers, he was so fed up with feeling like John was babying him too much that he decided that he was going to take an outside job, and he and Esther moved to another little cottage to be caretakers. That, of course, didn't last long. But he was also incredibly supportive in the episode The Heritage, when John is faced with the opportunity to sell the mountain, sell all the land, and move, and is struggling with that decision. Grandma and Grandpa have a conversation themselves, and ultimately Grandpa says, "It's up to you," to John, that they've had their chance to live on this mountain and raise their family there, and it is now up to John to decide what is best for him and his family, knowing that John is predominantly the one who is making sure that they are all fed and clothed. And although Grandpa helps out, that responsibility really falls on John's shoulders. So we see him willing to pass the mantle there to John to make that decision. Of course, in the end, John decides that he wants his children to have the same opportunity to be raised on the mountain. Throughout the series, we are made aware of Grandpa's great love and connection to the land. And this was something that was a part of who Will was in real life. He loved nature. He had a degree in botany. He nurtured all growing things. He planted the garden that was on the back lot of the studio, where you often saw different people tending to the garden. He planted the corn. They would weed it. So he really took care of that garden and had planted that. There were multiple times in episodes where you heard him talking about nature. He really let so many of the children know about plants and the care and the love of them. He really educates Elizabeth and Jim Bob about the importance of caring for the land and the trees. So that was really quite beautiful. And then in the episode The Estrangement, when Ben is planting all these seedlings that he is then selling to people, and he finds out from the sheriff that this is not a legal activity, that he doesn't have a grower's license, he doesn't have a seller's license. And when Epp comes to inquire about all of this, and he finds out that these are young saplings from Ben, that he kind of turns to Grandpa and sort of says, "You ought to know that you can't sell them when they're that young." And Grandpa's protective of Ben and takes responsibility for this and really sort of says, yes, I ought to know that, which clearly he does know, and he is covering for Ben. So we had these opportunities to see this protective side of Grandpa. With his grandchildren, we had the opportunity in different episodes to see him advise them and nurture them. In the Dust Bowl Cousins, John Boy comes to him when he's been having these conflicts with Job, who's calling him a coward because he won't fight with him. And John Boy goes to Grandpa and sort of talks to him about it. And Grandpa gives him great advice about making his own decision about whether or not he feels like he's a coward and what does he have to prove. And so that is helpful to John Boy in just clarifying for himself what's worth fighting for and what is just ridiculous. And ultimately, to protect Mary Ellen, John Boy does get in a fist fight with Job, which is about to turn very ugly when Grandpa steps in and just grabs them both by the scruff of the neck and ends that fight. In the episode The Search, when Jim Bob and Elizabeth and Olivia are lost, we get an opportunity to see Jim Bob utilize so much of what he has learned from Grandpa in helping to protect them and keep them safe and help guide them and leave a trail that then the family can follow in searching for them. So there was that taking forward what Jim Bob had learned from Grandpa, and we see that Jim Bob has really been paying attention and how valuable so much of what he learned from Grandpa is in his life. And then in the episode The First Casualty, Grandpa then speaks with Jim Bob, who is feeling terrible about having said to GW that he was dumb, and he now feels badly that was the last thing he remembers really having an interaction with GW about, and now GW has been killed, and Jim Bob doesn't know how to deal with that, and Grandpa gives him wonderful advice about how to put that into perspective. So very sweet in caring for Jim Bob. Similarly, in the episode The Firestorm, when Erin wants to participate in the beauty contest, and John is like, no, and the parents are like, no, you're not. No daughter of mine is going to be in a beauty contest and wearing a swimsuit. And Erin talks with Grandpa, and he says, well, I might have an idea about that. And Grandpa is instrumental in convincing Zuleika to have the young girls wear old-fashioned swimsuits so that they are modest. And then Erin proposes that to Daddy, shows him what she would be wearing. And there's a sweet moment when she asks him, so what do you think? And he says, well, okay, it's all right, you can do this. So Grandpa helping to sort of grease the wheels for members of the younger generation there on different episodes of the Waltons. And then, of course, we got to see how sharp and cunning and strategic he could be in the episode The Intruders, again, when they are trying to win this basically competition to get this contract that getting the lumber down the mountain. Grandpa tricks the other company into deciding to float their wood down the river, knowing that they are going to get stuck on all these sandbars, which allowed John to drive his truck safely down the mountain, not have to race it down there, but get it down there ahead of the other company so that they could get that contract. So we saw Grandpa kind of trick the other company into falling for his plan. Over the years, throughout my travels, when I would go out and do media interviews in different places, the person I most heard about was Will Geer. People would say that he had been there. So it seemed to me that he had been everywhere. And they always spoke of him as larger than life and what a wonderful person he was, and how generous he was with people he interacted with, and that was really Will. He really took people under his wing, and he did that with us. He gave us opportunities, like when we had a chance to perform at the Hollywood Bowl, because Will set that up, and he had been invited, and he brought all of us along to be a part of that and gave us the opportunity to have that amazing opportunity. He himself, during the time that he was blacklisted, he kind of retreated to his compound in Topanga Canyon. There he had planted gardens and whatnot. And he also built an outdoor theater and started a Shakespeare company, and that is still running to this day. His family, his daughters, his granddaughters, his grandkids still run that theater company. It has become very well respected, and they run summer camps. They run all kinds of wonderful things to keep Shakespeare alive and other sorts of shows. So truly a family enterprise. And we have had the pleasure of going out and seeing shows there and participating in different functions at Will's Theater. Will's ashes were scattered there in the Shakespeare Garden. And so it is a ongoing memorial to Will Geer. And there you have part 1 of my special Father's Day tribute. I hope you all enjoyed a very happy Father's Day, and I hope you will join me tomorrow for part 2 of my Father's Day special, where I talk about Ralph Waite as John Walton. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.